This is your Barbados Today Evening News Update for Tuesday, November 13. So glad you can join us. I'm Fernella Wedderburn. Our top story: the Barbados Chamber of Commerce and Industry is urging the business community to be vigilant in the face of a recent spate of armed robberies. Just yesterday, an armed robber stole an undisclosed amount of cash from the Zephyrins Minimart on Tudor Bridge, while over the weekend, patrons at a bar in St. George were robbed of their personal property. Last week, bread vendor Hayden Mayers was shot and killed, and Cave Shepherd in Whole Town also reported a break-in. BCCI President Ezra Prescott tells Barbados Today the chamber will be meeting with police next week to request more police presence in busy shopping areas ahead of the Christmas season and other security measures. Meanwhile, Acting Public Relations Officer of the Royal Barbados Police Force, Sergeant Michael Blackman, today appealed to businesses to implement appropriate security measures.
I should like to encourage you to be observant. Employees and employers should be alert at all times. You should look out for suspicious persons or vehicles around your businesses, especially at the opening and closing times. Persons wearing inappropriate clothing for the weather, such as heavy coats, hoodies, dark shades, scarves around their faces and neck. Other things you should consider: look at installing video cameras or alarm systems. And where you already have such equipment installed, try testing it at this time to ensure that it's in good working order.
In other news this Tuesday, Transport Minister Dr. William Duguid says the government may have to fork out much more than the original $100 million earmarked for road repairs. Duguid, who today surveyed the poor roads in St. Philip with his colleague ministers Peter Phillips and John King, cried shame on the poor conditions.
As you know, the Prime Minister is saying all the time that we have $100 million in roads to spend, in road construction to spend. I really think it's going to end up being maybe $200 million when we look at the state of the roads that we have now. But that is all part of bringing back growth to the country so that we can get on a growth path for this country once again.
Culture Minister John King is clearing the air on recent comments he made about government layoffs, which attracted public criticism. At the time, King lamented that Barbadians were wasting too much time discussing the current wave of public sector layoffs. Citizens said the statement showed a lack of empathy for those on the breadline, but King told Barbados Today he was misunderstood, even as he urged residents not to lose hope despite the current challenges.
For those persons who obviously misconstrued what it was I was saying, I would apologize to them first. But the reality is that even though we are going through what one can consider an extremely difficult time, this is nothing new for Barbadians. We are very resilient people. And for me, in life, if you only focus on one side of your story, then you leave a whole set of other things unattended, and you become that which you focus on.
Members of the Royal Barbados Police Force were out in their numbers today to bid farewell to Station Sergeant Joanna Alisilma Waldron. She was among the first females to join the Royal Barbados Police Force band and the first to reach supervisory and management levels in the band. It was a somber atmosphere as hundreds gathered at the Abundant Life Assembly Church to reflect on the life of the 54-year-old who was described as a committed and dedicated police officer who excelled in many areas of her 34-year career. Delivering the eulogy, Waldron's best friend of many years, Margot Odwin, described her as a queen inside and out who took good care of her relatives.
All who came in contact with Joanne, whether it was at work, home, or an unexpected encounter, would remember her for her warm, friendly, and caring personality. Joanne was not a person of flair and fashion, just simple and elegant. She was beautiful both on the inside and on the outside. She knew she was fearfully and wonderfully made by God, Her infectious smile was all the cosmetics she needed. On Saturday, October the 20th, 2018, my mother and I called Joanne to wish her a happy birthday. It was then we realized that the beautiful, charming voice of Joanne was fading. She bore her illness in quietness, which was one of her attributes. And never once did she complain or ask, "Why me?"
Meanwhile, delivering a tribute on behalf of the force, Acting Assistant Superintendent and Acting Assistant Director of Music for the RBPF band, Dexter Norville, said Waldron, who was assigned the number 763 when she was enlisted on January 23, 1984, is going to be missed by her colleagues.
Miss Waldron enjoyed a long, happy, and successful career. One cannot ask for a more committed, dependable, and trustworthy team player. She gave the band her all. She had good work ethics, and until her illness, sickness did not punctuate her service. Now, as mentioned before, Miss Waldron was among the first females to join the band and the first to reach the supervisory and mid-management levels, and was therefore a trailblazer for ladies in the band to follow. Her passing left a void with us, as she was loved by all band members. Her legacy will live on in all of us.
There's regional and international news after this short break.
Barbados Today, news you can trust.
To the region now, a landmark ruling today from the Caribbean Court of Justice. The court today declared that a law in Guyana which makes it a criminal offense for a man or woman to appear in a public place while dressed in the clothing of the opposite sex for an improper purpose is unconstitutional. The CCJ ordered that the law, Section 1531 of the Summary Jurisdiction Offences Act, is to be struck from the laws of Guyana. It meant victory for 4 transgender men who were arrested, convicted, and punished for cross-dressing in public back in February 2009. CCJ President Justice Adrian Saunders delivered the judgment.
A constitution must be read as a whole. Courts should be astute to avoid hindrances that would deter them from interpreting the Constitution in a manner faithful to its essence and its underlying spirit. If one part of the Constitution appears to run up against an individual's fundamental right, then in interpreting the Constitution as a whole, courts should place a premium on affording the citizen his or her enjoyment of the fundamental right, unless there is some overriding public interest. This court was therefore not precluded by the Savings Law Clause from testing the impugned law for its compatibility with the Constitution.
The ruling has been hailed as a victory for the LGBTI community. Attorney at law Nigel Hughes says the ruling is significant to Caribbean jurisprudence.
What the CCJ did in their decision today was to severely restrict and narrow the application of the Savings Clause to protect all those offensive parts of the statutes that we have that were there, like this particular section, since 1893. What, amongst the things that they said, which I think is of signal importance to practitioners of the law, was the Savings Clause does not protect offensive legislation where it offends the separation of powers. And I think that's a significant development.
And on the international scene, Britain struck a draft divorce deal with the European Union after more than a year of talks, thrusting Prime Minister Theresa May into a perilous battle over Brexit that could shape her country's prosperity for generations to come.
Britain has a Brexit deal, technically speaking.
The negotiations for our departure are now in the endgame.
British and EU negotiators have agreed on a draft of the divorce deal text. Now we're just waiting to see what it says officially and whether politicians in London, Northern Ireland and the EU will get on board with it. The next step, a meeting between Theresa May and her fractured cabinet on Wednesday. They'll be well aware there's just 5 months until Friday, the 29th of March, the Brexit grand finale. And even with a draft deal, it's not clear how the final agreement will play out.
And that's news. But for the very latest, visit our website at www.barbadostoday.bb. You can also subscribe to our e-paper, email updates, and like us on Facebook, and sign up for our breaking news alerts via WhatsApp. We're also on Izumi Media and bus terminals, as well as screenplay at supermarkets and gas stations near you. And you can also hear us on Mix 96.9 FM. I'm Fernella Wedderburn. Good evening.